Welcome. Today we will delve into the heart of a naval battle that changed the course of history. In December 1939, the German cruiser Admiral Graf Spee sailed into the Atlantic to terrorize Allied shipping. When one of the British ships spotted smoke on the horizon, a struggle began that questioned the inevitability of confrontation and the strategic plans of both sides. How did a ship built around circumventing the restrictions of the Treaty of Versailles become a symbol of German naval tactics? And why did this particular battle prove to be a turning point for both fleets? In a single night, amid tense confrontation, the fate of not only ships and commanders, but also the future of naval strategy was decided. This is not just a story of combat. It is a clash of ideas, ambitions, and survival, where each fact reveals a new facet of the mystery. Are you ready to see how strategic decisions and human destinies intertwined in the fight for control over the Atlantic? Then let's begin. In the cold silence of the ocean's depths, in December 1940, one of the most mysterious and dramatic chapters in the history of naval battles of World War II unfolded. During this dark, anticipation-filled period, in the very heart of the Atlantic, where darkness and wind merged into an endless storm, the German ship known as Admiral Graf Spee took the stage to change the fate of the world's oceans. This vessel was not just a warship, not merely an iron monster assembled from metal and technology. It became a symbol of a new approach, a new tactic, a new perspective on naval warfare. Its hull concealed not only power, but also a strategic idea designed to break Germany out of isolation, to give it the ability to fight for its interests on the global stage, despite the restrictions imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. And it was precisely at this moment, in December 1940, that the fate of the Atlantic, the destiny of Allied and Axis forces, was in the hands of a single ship, a single clash, a single moment when the decision was made amid the raging ocean. On that December day, as winter fog thickened over the waters, British merchant ships moved slowly and cautiously along routes fraught with danger and risk. These vessels, living symbols of Allied effort, carried not only goods but vital resources, strategic materials, weapons, and food that were essential for survival and victory. They were pursued, terrorized, by German raiders. It was on this day, when the boundaries between safety and threat seemed to blur, that a faint, barely audible sound of water breaking the silence was heard, and smoke appeared on the horizon. It was light, almost imperceptible, yet unmistakable, a harbinger of the inevitable clash. The smoke signaled the first sign of an approaching storm that would eventually engulf the entire Atlantic expanse. On the horizon, like a shadow from the last century, a group of 3 British cruisers appeared. They are not just warships, they embody British naval power, symbolizing the traditions and grandeur of the empire. Compared to them, one German ship, the Admiral Graf Spee, seemed smaller and less massive, but no less dangerous. It was a panzer ship, the armored ship, designed according to a special concept, specifically built to circumvent the restrictions imposed by the Treaty of Versailles. These restrictions were not merely formalities. They were limitations that Germany, amidst its internal struggles and political intrigues, decided to overcome. The 6 11-inch guns mounted on the ship were not enormous by modern standards, nor as large as those on battleships, but with high rate of fire and accuracy, they could pose a deadly threat. These ships, built for raiding and attacking trade routes, embodied the strategy of being small but fast, capable of striking and then disappearing, leaving behind only smoke and destruction. Society, shaken by the aftermath of World War I, was more delicate and vulnerable than ever. Under the terms of Versailles, Germany was required to limit its naval ambitions, reduce its fleet, and abandon powerful battleships. But as years showed, these restrictions only encouraged the creation of pocket ships, small but combat-capable vessels, capable of evading control and inflicting damage. These ships were not merely military machines, they were the result of political and technological challenges of the time. Germany used them as tools to keep the enemy on edge, to make it clear that even under restrictions, it remained a threat. They were part of a broader strategy, raids on maritime communication lines aimed at disrupting Allied logistics, weakening economic pressure, and demonstrating to the world the strength of a new Germany that was unafraid to play by its own rules. But the question hanging over this story is, was this conflict inevitable? Could the clash between the Admiral Graf Spee and the British fleet have been avoided? Or, as history shows, strategic decisions, political ambitions, and tactical miscalculations led to the point where confrontation was only a matter of time. Internal dilemmas of command, challenges faced by officers, risks, and consequences, all these elements intertwined into a complex web from which it was difficult to escape. Every decision, every move, could have been decisive. And this is the main question of this chapter. How possible was it to avoid this encounter? And ultimately, who bears responsibility for its occurrence? This battle was not merely a clash of ships. It was a test of tactics, strategy, and fate that would determine the outcome of the struggle for control over the Atlantic. Ultimately, these events, their consequences, and the lessons learned from them will become the key to understanding how a seemingly insignificant, minor skirmish could change the course of world history. The further we delve into this episode, the clearer it becomes that this battle marked the beginning of a new era of naval conflicts, where every ship, decision, and minute could mean the end for many. The evidence and testimonies we can present today are undeniable. This conflict was not a coincidence or a matter of circumstance. It was the result of powerful strategic calculations, political decisions, and technological progress. And its outcome, despite all attempts to hide the truth, was predetermined not only by the force of weapons, but also by fate and the choices of those in command. In this dramatic confrontation, where every second could be fatal, the human factor, fear, daring, and calculation, played a crucial role, not just the guns and tactics. That is why this story is not merely a historical anecdote, but a lesson about how strategic decisions, political ambitions, and technological innovations intertwined in a brutal game for control over the seas, where the winner is not always the one who fires first, but the one who can foresee, think ahead, and make decisions at the most critical moment. This battle was not only the start of the conflict, but also the launch point for subsequent events that determined the course of the war and the fate of millions. Looking at this dramatic episode, we understand that the fight for control over the Atlantic was only beginning, and every decision, every move, could be the last for those daring to stand in the way of the power and strategy of a new naval era. In the post-war world, torn apart by the consequences of World War I, Germany found itself constrained by international treaties designed to limit its military power, especially its navy. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, became not just a document but an act of capitulation, defining the future boundaries of the German fleet. It imposed strict restrictions: no more than 6 battleships of the battleship type, 6 cruisers, and 12 destroyers, with a maximum gun caliber of 11 inches. These limitations became not only regulations but also a challenge for German engineers, strategists, and designers, who, faced with strict regulations, had to find ways to circumvent them in order to preserve naval strength and influence. Under these conditions, a new tactic emerged, later known as pocket battleship tactics. German engineers, like alchemists, worked in the shadows, developing unique designs capable of breaking established limits. Their goal was to create ships that resembled cruisers, fast, maneuverable, relatively small in tonnage, but with firepower comparable to larger, heavier battleships. As a result, the so-called Panzerschiffe appeared, which translated means armored ships. They were armed with 11-inch guns, as prescribed by the limits, but in terms of size and tonnage, they were significantly inferior to heavy battleships. However, it was precisely this that became their main advantage. Their smaller size made them faster, more maneuverable, capable of changing direction and speed more quickly than their larger opponents. These ships were not just a technical solution but a strategic move, a challenge to the existing naval balance. German engineers exploited loopholes, gaps in the rules, to achieve maximum efficiency. They designed vessels that resembled cruisers in appearance and characteristics, but matched heavy battleships in firepower. Sometimes they were even called dummy ships, and this was no coincidence. Anyone who looked at such vessels would see a neat, swift ship ready to maneuver, rather than a heavy monster capable of destroying everything in its path. The strategic idea behind this was clear yet clever. Germany aimed to fight on the open sea without the need for large battles that could lead to complete destruction and losses. Instead, it relied on an asymmetric warfare tactic, where these pocket-sized ships could destroy weaker enemy vessels, distract the British fleet, create chaos, and keep it in constant tension. This was not merely a way to expand its naval influence. It was a challenge to the old principles of naval warfare, where large battleships dominated and smaller ships were seen only as shadows or auxiliary tools. The Germans saw these ships as instruments enabling them to fight on the ocean without engaging in large-scale heavy battles, instead using cunning, speed, and precision. Reality proved that these ships became not only a symbol of technical ingenuity, but also living proof that constraints can serve as a catalyst for innovation. Panzerschiffe are not just ships. They embody German military strategy, which exploited the enemy's weaknesses to create a new reality. They laid the groundwork for future concepts, raider operations, sabotage, and covert attacks that later became a vital part of the German naval arsenal. However, at the heart of this complex equation lies the question of effectiveness. How successfully did Germany exploit the loopholes of the Treaty of Versailles to build powerful ships capable of shifting the balance of power in the Atlantic? Could more have been achieved? Or did these ships, despite their cleverness and innovations, turn out to be merely an illusion, a disguise for weakness? These questions form the basis of this study. After all, the success or failure of a strategy is always determined not only by its design, but also by the real strength it can demonstrate in battle, in confrontation with an opponent who does not sleep. And here, a critical point arises. These pocket ships are not just tactical solutions. They became the foundation for a new, more flexible, and asymmetric strategy of the German fleet. They laid the foundation for raider operations, for a fight that was not conducted in traditional naval battles but in the shadows, in silence, in a constant game of anticipation. Thus began an era when naval power was no longer defined solely by size and firepower. This is the key to understanding how Germany, despite strict restrictions, managed to preserve its maritime ambitions and prepare the ground for new tactics, strategies, and challenges that would eventually reshape the face of naval warfare worldwide. In early autumn of 1939, when the world still teetered on the brink of inevitable war, a ship silently and lethally set out on its journey beneath the ocean's surface. This vessel would later become a symbol of German naval ambitions and strategic cunning. It was the legendary Admiral Graf Spee, a special-purpose cruiser armed and equipped not for frontline combat, but for operations in the enemy's rear. In the Atlantic, where Allied shipping was a vital artery for supplying the Allied nations. Its commander, Captain Hans Langsdorff, a man whose gaze could pierce through any mask or illusion, led this deadly ship, infiltrating countless routes to break cargo supply chains, undermine the enemy's economic strength, and leave them without hope. The first major encounter occurred in the very first month of autumn, September 30th. That day, in the southern waters off the coast of Brazil, approximately 50 nautical miles south of Pernambuco, Graf Spee intercepted a cargo ship, the British steamer named Selempt. What was happening at that moment? A quiet night, the calm of the ocean disturbed only by the soft hum of diesel engines and the metallic screech of steel as the stealthy and relentless ship approached its prey. The crew of Selim, unaware of the impending danger, only sensed the tension in the air when the German cruiser suddenly emerged from the darkness. Contrary to orders to keep radio signals strictly secret, someone from the crew, or perhaps under pressure of circumstances, sent a distress message. Evidence suggests that this signal was intercepted, and although Langsdorff's team initially planned to minimize traces of their activity, communications were compromised. Soon after, the fate of the cargo ship sealed the destiny of its crew. It was set ablaze and sunk by fire, and the sailors were taken prisoner, their fates now in the hands of the Germans, who showed no mercy. This act was not merely an attack, it was a challenge sent to the entire world. At that moment, as smoke rises over the water and flames engulf the wooden hulls, a clear idea takes shape in Captain Langsdorff's mind. Every intercepted and captured vessel is not only a tactical success, but also an element of a broader geopolitical game, where each ship becomes part of a larger strategy, intimidation and demonstration of power. And what if the Allies begin to resist? What if they try to stop this formidable hunter? Then, in order to maintain the line, Count Spee continues his raid without stopping. By early October, 5 days later, he attacks the ship Newton Beach, a cargo vessel that seemed insignificant. But even here his leadership style is evident. After inflicting damage, the crew of the ship was released, and the vessel was left alive to continue its mission. This gesture was no coincidence. It demonstrates the moral line that despite all the brutality, the raider commanders adhere to. In an era when war turns into a game of maritime nightmares, and each attack could be the last, Hans Langsdorff and his team follow rules that seem to contradict the logic of total destruction. They do not attack civilian ships without reason, nor do they destroy lives unnecessarily, or so it appears at first glance. Soon, already in early October, the German cruiser captures and sinks another vessel off the coast of South Africa, a ship named Ashleia. Evidence shows that the crew was taken prisoner and the ship was destroyed, leaving only a trail of smoke and blood behind. In mid-month, on October 10th, the ship once again demonstrates its power by sinking the Huntsman, a reserve vessel used for replenishing supplies and crew. This act is not only a display of strength but also a confirmation that Count Spee does not spare anyone who stands in his way. Following this, on October 22nd, he captures the MV Trevannion, a vessel carrying valuable cargo, and by mid-November, the ship Africa Shell, indicating his constant activity and unwavering determination. The most remarkable thing is that during these raids, armed to the teeth, the cruiser did not lose its sense of measure. The crews of the ships captured and evacuated were used to serve his interests, and then were sunk to leave no traces that could lead back to him. But the most important secret revealed later is the interception of the Doric Star, a ship that turned out to be more than just a cargo vessel. Its holds contained intelligence so valuable that it could change the course of the entire war. The transmitted information concerned routes near the mouth of the Plata River, a strategic point crucial for controlling maritime space. Evidence indicates that this intelligence became one of Count Spee's most significant contributions to the overall picture of naval warfare. But perhaps the central question of this story is not only about tactics, not only about strategy, but about morality. How does Langsdorff's team, a man perceived as a professional, adhere to his principles? In an era when the boundaries between war and crime are blurred and moral guidelines are constantly tested, the question arises, were their actions justified? Or, on the contrary, and this is the true tragedy, even in the most brutal war, there are rules, and these rules demand not only strength from commanders, but also a certain moral compromise. What is the boundary between necessity and crime? And how exactly does the strategy of raider combat operations implemented by Langsdorff influence the outcome of the entire struggle? So far in this story, the line between heroism and crime remains thin, almost imperceptible. These raids, these attacks, not only devastated shipping routes, but also created an atmosphere of uncertainty, instilling fear and paralyzing Allied routes. Every vessel sailing the sea became a potential target. From time to time, and this was an important tactical aspect, the cruiser would evacuate crews to keep them alive, which added to its image not only of a dangerous enemy, but also a human one. But it is precisely this game on the edge of morality, this constant struggle to balance cruelty and humanity, that is the essence of what made Hans Langsdorff and his ship unique in naval history. Thus, these raids not only ravaged shipping lanes, created chaos and fear, they became part of a broader strategy. A strategy in which uncertainty, surprise, and moral pressure are the most important tools. From time to time, in the shadows, in silence, deep in the ocean, questions arise. Who is this man, this crew, these ships? What drives them? And how will this maritime nightmare end when all sides realize that there are no winners in this game, only survival, at any cost? In the early morning hours of December 12, 1939, in the harsh waters of the Southern Ocean, in those places where storms rage and fate is fierce, a battle unfolded that would forever enter the history of naval combat. It was a day when the silence before the storm proved deceptive, and every second could be the last for those daring to stand in the path of the mighty German cruiser, renowned for its speed, firepower, and ruthlessness. The time was early, and the horizon still concealed the shadows of night when the first alarm signals sounded in the sky and on the water. At that moment, in the very heart of the Southern Ocean, against the backdrop of an endless gray sky and infinite waves, the final act of confrontation began, one fateful for the ships that had become symbols of an era. It seemed as if the entire world was holding its breath, watching as three British cruisers, Exeter, Ajax, and Achilles, slowly but surely approached the mouth of the River Plate. This narrow maritime corridor, like a slit hiding danger and secrets, was to become the arena of a decisive battle. The smell of salt, machine oils, and the premonition of a clash that could change the course of the war filled the air. At that moment, Admiral Graf Spee, a German cruiser known for its formidable reputation and tactical cunning, was heading toward the river's mouth, hoping to hide there to avoid total destruction. It moved across the sea like a predator, confident and stealthy, believing that its superiority and firepower would ensure safe concealment and an opportunity to regroup. The first minutes of the battle marked the beginning of a fierce struggle for dominance in these waters. At 6:14 a.m., when the first rays of the sun had yet to pierce through the clouds, HMS Exeter, the largest and most powerful of the British cruisers, spotted a cloud of smoke on the horizon, an ominous sign of an approaching enemy. This smoke, like a warning signal, marked the beginning of a chain of events that would alter the course of the naval battle. At that moment, tense conversations erupted on the command bridges and in the command cabins. Time was critical. In the very heart of the command, the question arose: what to do next? But a decision was made swiftly and decisively. At 6:14 a.m., HMS Exeter detected the smoke, and this signal became the start of the final battle. Simultaneously, at sea, the Admiral Graf Spee was present, which, despite an approaching storm of battle, remained calm and focused. He knew his time was running out, that every second could be the last. His crew, as if in a trance, watched the approaching ships, preparing for a fight that promised to be one of the most brutal of the war. Officers, sitting at their instruments, carefully monitored the readings on the displays, while the captain, with a stern gaze and determined expression, made strategic decisions. At that moment, in the maritime space, commands were issued, shots rang out, echoing into the void, creating the impression that fate itself held the outcome of this confrontation in its hands. Just minutes after the smoke was spotted, at 6:18 a.m., the German cruiser opened fire on Exeter. It was a moment when silence was shattered by the thunder of artillery volleys. 6 11-inch guns of the German ship fired at the target. The British cruiser became the target of fire that could destroy it within minutes. Explosions tore through Exeter's hull. Clouds of smoke and flames rose into the sky, and commands were shouted on the bridges. Communication with the command, which could have helped save the ship, was lost. One of the command nodes was destroyed, and Captain Bell, despite this critical moment, bravely led the remaining forces. issuing orders that sounded like a cry of despair and determination at the same time. His voice, transmitted via voice communication, was the only thread connecting his team to their fate. The response from the British cruisers was swift. Ajax and Achilles, realizing that Exeter could no longer continue the fight, began to strike the German ship, trying to blind and slow it down. Amid the roar of artillery volleys, clouds of smoke and fire, the question arose: could they surround the more powerful enemy? Time was running out, and the battle was unfolding with incredible intensity. Exeter, sustaining increasingly severe damage, gradually but surely began to lose its combat capability. Eventually, due to heavy damage and the threat of sinking, Captain Bell ordered the ship to abandon the fight. A powerful British ship, when its strength was exhausted, was forced to leave the battlefield, leaving behind a trail of destruction and bitter memories. However, despite this, the fight was not over. At 7:10 a.m., Ajax and Achilles made a desperate attempt to encircle the German ship, using smoke screens to hide from its guns. This tactic, based on cunning and speed, gave the Germans a chance to escape southward, concealed in the fog and shadows. At that moment, questions hovered over the sea. Could the British fleet effectively use their encirclement tactic against a more powerful opponent? Was this a tactical failure or a strategic trap? How did this influence the further course of the battle and the outcome of the entire operation? Evidence and testimonies show that, despite the damage, the British ships continued the pursuit, refusing to surrender, retreat, or let the German ship vanish into the sea mist. This was not just a fight for dominance. It was a battle for honor, for fate, for the future. So what was the outcome of this engagement? Could the British fleet, despite heavy damage and the loss of Exeter, use the encirclement tactic to achieve victory, or at least halt the enemy? The question remains open, as analysis indicates that success or failure in this confrontation largely depended on the commander's ability to adapt quickly and make decisions amid complete uncertainty and danger. Time was passing, and the chase continued, because in naval warfare, as in life, nothing is final until the last shot is fired, until the last second. Despite the damage, the British ships kept pursuing, foreshadowing the final fate of Graf Spee. This pursuit, filled with tension and danger, became not just a tactical maneuver, but a symbol of determination and resilience. In this battle, which could have been the last for many, the true essence of naval combat was revealed. Not only power and firepower, but also the ability to withstand blows, maintain focus, and fight to the end. And this story, despite its brutality and tragedy, became part of a legend that continues to live in the memories of those who saw how fate is woven from fire and water, risk and heroism. In the calm waters off the Uruguayan coast, where the tranquility of the sea seems unchanging, one of the most tense and dramatic pages of World War II was unfolding. At the very center of this story was the cruiser Graf Spee, a German warship whose fate and the fate of the entire Atlantic campaign depended on decisions made in the port of Montevideo. This port, seemingly a neutral harbor, became the arena of diplomatic confrontation, where powers with interest far from peace and harmony clashed. And all this took place against the backdrop of a global conflict, in conditions where every moment could be decisive. After the cruiser Gneisenau was defeated in a naval battle with a British destroyer, its crew found themselves in a trap. Damaged, exhausted, and with little hope of further resistance, the ship headed to a neutral port. Montevideo, a city with a rich history and a strategic hub on the map of South America, became the final refuge for the German vessel. But here, in this quiet and seemingly tranquil port, a real diplomatic struggle over the fate of the Gneisenau unfolded. According to international norms, a vessel sheltering in neutral waters could not remain in port for more than 24 hours. Otherwise, it would be considered a violation of the country's sovereignty. However, Captain Langsdorff, the ship's commander, knew that time was working against him. He requested permission for a longer repair period, 2 weeks, to fix the damages and prepare for a possible combat or escape. His request sparked a storm of diplomatic debates and speculation. Britain and its allies, primarily, were determined to prevent the German cruiser from taking shelter in a port that, in their view, would serve as a staging ground for further actions. They invoked articles of the Hague Convention, an international document regulating the rights of neutral states and their obligation to prevent ports from being used for military purposes. In their eyes, allowing the Gneisenau to repair would mean violating international treaties and creating a potential threat to Allied ships in the Atlantic. But the British did not limit themselves to legal arguments. They took active measures on the diplomatic front. The British ambassador to Uruguay, Eugene Millington Drake, initiated a provocative strategy. He organized a series of maneuvers designed to make the German command feel trapped. Over several days, British and French merchant ships received orders to leave the port at intervals of just one day. This created the impression that the German cruiser was being denied the right to safe harbor, forcing it to remain in port under constant pressure. At the same time, Britain spread false radio signals, simulating the approach of powerful naval forces. These signals, filled with ambiguity and anxiety, fostered the illusion that a fleet capable of destroying any German ship nearby was already at sea. Inside the port, the situation grew increasingly tense. The Gneisenau command felt the mounting pressure each day, resources dwindling and ammunition running out. They understood that time was their most dangerous enemy. When diplomatic efforts reached an impasse and international pressure on Uruguay increased, Captain Langsdorff was forced to make a difficult decision. He realized that his ship, though damaged, still posed a threat. But in the event that it was captured or destroyed, it would mean not only the loss of the vessel, but also betrayal of its own commanders and crew. On the night when everything seemed to be moving toward the inevitable, Captain Langsdorff gave the order to blow up the Graf Spee. Inside the command quarters, on that night when the whole world was watching this dramatic standoff, an explosion erupted, tearing the giant ship apart. It was not merely an act of destruction, it was the final act of resistance, a symbol of despair and determination not to surrender to the enemy. Could diplomatic efforts have forced the Graf Spee to leave Montevideo without bloodshed and losses? Could a compromise have been reached to preserve honor and avoid the destruction of the ship and its commanders? These questions have long echoed in the minds of historians and strategists. Analysis shows that diplomacy, even under intense international pressure and behind-the-scenes games, could have been more effective. Perhaps if Uruguay or other neutral countries had found the strength and opportunity to act as mediators, framing the task not only within legal norms but also considering the strategic interests of both sides, the scenario might have unfolded differently. But at that time, everything was already destroyed, both diplomatic efforts and hopes of saving the ship. As a result, the Graf Spee was destroyed, and its demise heralded a new era in naval warfare, where diplomacy and military force fought for every breath of freedom, for every chance to survive. This diplomatic conflict was not merely an episode, it became a pivotal point that determined the course of history. It demonstrated how thin the line is between victory and defeat, how the value of diplomacy lies not only in words, but also in the ability to preserve lives and future prospects. And it was this struggle, this game on the edge, that became the key to understanding how destinies are decided in conditions of global war, where every decision is a step into the unknown, and every minute is a chance or death. On that fateful night, when a shadow looms over the river mouth of the Plata, a silhouette appears on the horizon, a ship that has become a symbol of struggle and defeat, heavy, threatening, like a living organism that, despite all attempts to resist, is forced to accept a tragic fate. It was the German cruiser Gneisenau, one of the most powerful and formidable warships of its time. But that night, it became a victim not only of the enemy, but also of its own command, its own fate, a fate that was ultimately and irrevocably sealed. 2 weeks. That was how long the ship's commander, Captain Hans Langsdorff, fought for every opportunity to preserve his flotilla. He waited, observed, analyzed. His crew, exhausted and drained, felt the weight of uncertainty. Resources running low, ammunition decreasing, and the enemy approaching ever closer. Time passed like sand through fingers, and each minute brought the Germans closer to the inevitable. In a situation where all chances of salvation had disappeared and the circumstances became hopeless, the commander made the only decision he could: to leave the ship as a symbol of fearlessness in history, but also as a sign of tragedy. On December 17, 1939, at the mouth of the Plata River, as stormy waves, wind, and the noise of the approaching enemy merged into a roaring chorus, the Graf Spee was scuttled. It was no coincidence that at this moment, the captain ordered the hatch valves to be opened, allowing the ship to sink into the dark depths and forever disappear from the face of the earth, so as not to fall into enemy hands. Water flooded inside, filled the holds, taking with it the last symbol of German naval power. This was not merely a decision. It was an act of despair, the final attempt to preserve honor and prevent the enemy from seizing what had been built with the blood and effort of thousands. But this act provoked the fury of Adolf Hitler himself, the leader of the Third Reich. Analyzing the facts, it is impossible not to notice that for the Nazi leadership, the Graf Spee was not just a ship. It was a symbol of naval strength, a testament to Germany's power and technological superiority. Its sinking seemed like a betrayal, a blow to national pride. Hitler, accustomed to triumphs and victories, perceived this act as a personal insult, a sign that even the most mighty fleet, built with such effort, was vulnerable and weak. His anger was uncontrollable, and he believed that such a defeat was not merely a tactical mistake, but a strategic error that could cost Germany its future. But for Captain Langsdorff, his crew, and all who witnessed this dramatic moment, the decision to scuttle was not just a matter of tactics or an order from above. It was an act of personal responsibility, a tragedy that forever changed their destinies. Realizing that returning to Germany was impossible due to damage, lack of resources, and ammunition, he made a decision that was both heroic and tragic. In the days following the tragic night in Buenos Aires, he decided to end his life. That night, as his face was illuminated by the dim light of a lamp in his final room, he understood. His mission was complete, his duty fulfilled. But at what cost? His own life. In his last hours, silence reigned, broken only by quiet, heavy sighs, and the fear that everything he had done was in vain. The captain's funeral was held with military honors. His body was buried in a grave that became a place of remembrance and mourning. A part of the crew, who survived the catastrophe, found refuge in neighboring Montevideo, where their fates intertwined with future stories, regrets, and pride for what they had endured. Their testimonies of suffering, struggle, and respect for the heroic act of the captain became part of the memory of peoples, divided by an ocean, but united by this dramatic event. The decision to scuttle the Gneisenau was not only the end of a single battle, but also a turning point in German naval tactics. Following this act, a radical strategic shift occurred. Germany abandoned traditional surface combat ships in favor of submarines, which could operate covertly, suddenly, and at minimal cost. This choice became a symbol of a new era, the age of submarine warfare, that determined the course of World War II and forever changed the rules of naval combat. This tragic story is not only about the fate of the ship and its crew, but also about the contradictions between tactical decisions, strategic ambitions, and the destinies of the people at the helm. Langsdorff's very decision to sink the ship to prevent it from falling into enemy hands raises inevitable questions. Was it justified? How tragic was it? Could it have been done differently? This act of self-sacrifice became not only a symbol of personal bravery, but also a reflection of conflicts within the system itself. Between military necessity and political ambitions, between strategic wisdom and emotional impulse. At its core lies a contradiction: to defend honor or to obey orders, to preserve the ship or destroy it so it would not become an enemy trophy. This contradiction is the main thematic hook of the entire story. It shows how a single act, a tragedy, can become a symbol of the conflicts in which destinies and ideas clash. Ultimately, the story of the Gneisenau is not just about a ship and its commander. It is a story about choice, about the price a person pays when faced with the impossibility of choosing otherwise. And within this choice lies all the complexity, all the depth of human fate, which despite technological advances and strategic plans, remains ultimately a personal tragedy and heroism at the same time. In the shadow of dawn, when the silence of the sea surface was still unbroken by any sound, a silhouette appeared on the horizon that forever changed the course of naval history. It was one of the most vivid and dramatic episodes at the beginning of World War II, the Battle of the River Plate, where a warship, becoming a symbol of Germany's defeat at sea, the Gneisenau, fell victim to a strategic trap that marked the final turning point in the naval tactics of both opposing sides. This episode was not merely a combat clash. It was a pinpoint shot that awakened an entire era, changed tactics, overturned foundations, and left an indelible mark on international maritime law. The scuttling of the Gneisenau is an event etched in memory as a symbol of Germany's defeat on the naval front at the very start of World War II. On that day, when the German combat destroyer, once considered invincible, was forced to surrender or perish, a new perspective on combat tactics, strategy, and diplomatic boundaries emerged. Eyewitness accounts show that the ship, covered in a layer of sea foam and shattered fragments, slowly sank under the pressure of Allied escort groups. It was not just a defeat, it was a symbol, reaching up to the sky, a demonstration that even the most powerful weapons and tactical advantages can prove powerless against determination and strategic planning. It is said that this moment became a milestone that determined the future course of naval warfare. After the Graf Spee was sunk, the German command shifted to entirely different means of conducting war. Abandoning large-scale surface combat ships, they concentrated all their efforts on submarines, on U-boats, which in turn became weapons of a new type, stealthy, fast, and deadly. Beneath this defeat, in offices and strategic centers, decisions were brewing that would forever change the approach to naval combat. There was no longer room for large fleets and bright, loud victories. Now, stealth was more important, so much so that even the most powerful ships could fall prey to tiny submarines. It is no secret that, upon seeing the strength and danger of German U-boats, the Allies began to strengthen their maritime countermeasures. Powerful escort groups, chains of ships protecting convoys, were created, and their role became critically important. Mechanisms to defend against U-boats, new tactics, radio interception and reconnaissance systems. All of this became a response to the new threat. Throughout the war, Germany continued its naval raids, but no longer with the ability to showcase the power of large warships. Instead, it developed a strategy of covert attacks, which ultimately became one of the main factors shaping the course of the conflict. The defeat of the Graf Spee served as a signal that in naval combat, victory now depended not only on strength and size, but also on intelligence, speed, and the ability to remain hidden. This episode also had a significant impact on international maritime law. Evidence and facts show that after the events at the mouth of the Plata, measures to control neutral ports, enforce maritime boundaries, and regulate the actions of warring and neutral states were strengthened. Attention to legality in the maritime space increased, as it was then that the international community realized that chaos and lawlessness at sea could lead to catastrophic consequences for all. A decision was made to more strictly regulate actions at sea, to establish new rules aimed at limiting the free use of maritime routes and protecting civilian vessels from attacks. This battle was not just a clash of two ships, nor merely a lesson in tactics and strategy. It became one of the first major confrontations that defined the face of naval warfare. It demonstrated that in modern conflict, courage and strength are not enough. Intelligence, adaptability, and the ability to anticipate the enemy's actions are equally crucial. In the history of naval combat, it remains a symbol of heroism and tragedy, a reminder of the cost of military decisions, and that every shot, every tactical move, is not just part of a battle, but an element shaping the destiny of entire eras. But how exactly did this episode change both sides' approach to naval warfare? How did it influence the development of strategies, the creation of new rules, and international law? The answers lie deep within the events, in the analysis of decisions and consequences that followed this defeat. All the power, fury, and strategy demonstrated by both sides were reflected in this pivotal clash, which became a turning point not only for the specific battle, but for the entire history of naval conflicts. Ultimately, behind all of this are not just military tactics or political interests. Behind it is a lesson that remains forever in memory. A lesson about the value of human decision-making in wartime, about how a single moment, a mistake, or conversely, a precise decision can change the course of history. This lesson serves as a reminder that on a global scale, war is not only a clash of forces, but also a collision of minds, strategies, and human destinies. And it is precisely in this that its tragedy and its greatness lie.